r/NoSleep. Posted by u/withbite. I was in line to inherit a lot of money. But first, I had to do something very strange. I used to wish for something exciting to happen in my humdrum life. After the events of the last 2 days, all I can say is, be careful what you wish for. I am a porter in the local hospital and live in a cramped apartment that's close enough to walk to work if I want, but also close enough for the view at night from my window to be dominated by the plume of smoke which rises, as darkness falls, from the chimney of the hospital incinerator. I know what is being burnt in it. I help take it there and cannot help but think of what will remain even after the intense heat, of the fine ash that will fall back to earth. I live alone and dwell too much on things like this. On top of this, the pay for my job is lousy and I have a lot of debt. There's a credit card in particular that I'm struggling with. The account has been handed over to a collection agency and I am constantly expecting a knock on the door. Up to now they have restricted themselves to phoning daily. I usually let my mobile go to answer phone and deleted the messages unread, until yesterday, when I had half a dozen missed calls showing when I checked my phone at the end of my shift. Things, I figured, must have escalated with the debt and I decided I needed to take my head out of the sand. Feeling sick with worry, I pressed play on my messages. To my surprise, they were all from a lawyer. He urgently needed to talk to me about my sister's will. I would not say that I had ever been close to my sister. We grew up in the same house but pretty much avoided each other as much as we could. She moved out when she turned 18. I stayed until I was 25, leeching off my parents, if the truth be told. By then my sister was flying high. She was marketing director for a company with its hooks in dozens of countries and was making big bucks. A few times I reached out to her asking for a helping hand, but she never got back to me. Looking in the mirror I see someone who gets through the day, nothing more, nothing less, so I never blamed her for keeping me at a distance. Still, I was shocked. Did this mean she had passed away? I did the math. She was only 38, 2 years younger than me. My hands were shaking as I dialed the number the lawyer had left. They were shaking worse 30 minutes later as I was turning the ignition key in my car, which I kept parked up around the corner from my apartment. My little sister was dead, he had told me. And she had left me a sizable bequest in her will. But there was a condition which needed to be discussed, in person, as soon as possible. Ignoring a call I knew to be from the collection agency, I set off. I thought wistfully of how soon I would be able to phone them and pay off the debt in full. That would be such a relief. Sizable. Surely that meant thousands. Maybe more. I am ashamed to say that I was more excited than sad as I reached the lawyer's office in a bland complex in the center of town. It was getting late by now and there was no one on reception, so I pressed the button next to the lawyer's nameplate. He answered and said he would be right out. He was a middle-aged, dressed smartly, and seemed to blend into the tidy yet bland surroundings of the office. As he began to talk about the will, I bit down on my urge to tell him to hurry up. To get to the how much. When he finally did, I had a new urge to resist, jumping up and down and hollering with delight. I was lined to inherit a cool $250,000. My problems washed away before my glazed-over eyes and I began to see a future of wonderful laziness. Then he went and ruined it all. There is a condition, he said. As I mentioned on the phone. Yeah, I thought. Whatever. He cleared his throat. Your sister had a concern regarding her burial. She was afraid, you see, of being buried alive and waking up underground with no way out. It was quite the terror. But she is dead, I pointed out. You told me that. She is. Her death was certified by a suitable medical professional and the paperwork is sound. So? To help assuage her fear she had her coffin fitted with a two-way radio. At this point, he opened a drawer and took out a walkie-talkie before continuing. So that in the eventuality she has been buried alive and comes round, she can call someone and they can rescue her. I did not like the way this was going. Someone? I asked. He nodded. Yes, you. The condition of receiving your inheritance is to take this radio and wait by your sister's grave for a period of no less than 5 days. After that time, if you do not hear from her, you are free to leave and may return to this office where I will arrange the transfer of funds. That's batshit crazy, I said. I prefer perfectly legal, he replied. He slid the radio towards me over the polished surface of his mahogany desk. $250,000, I said. It could be in your account by this time next week. What else was I meant to do? I said yes. I would do it. I did though have one more question before I left. I turned back to look at the lawyer. My sister never rated me. Even though this is insane, why should she trust me with her life like this? The lawyer did not miss a beat before answering. She told me if she did come back she did not want any of her colleagues or circle of highly placed friends to know about her concern. Being viewed as fearless holds a lot of currency in big business. Not that you would know anything about that. He moved his attention to some papers on his desk. Arrogant SOB, I thought, and stormed off. Now, in the spirit of honesty which I am trying to stick to here, I will tell you that initially I was not going to go anywhere near the graveyard where the lawyer told me my sister was buried. I was going to go back and sit in my apartment, phone in sick to work as I would soon no longer need the pittance they paid me, and go back to ignoring my phone. In 5 days' time I would head back to the lawyer and wearing my best loyal hound dog face tell him how I waited by the grave with the radio to my ear through rain and shine, darkness and daylight, and there was not a peep come crackling over the shortwave from my sister, Lord rest her soul. Now give me my damn money. But no, I decided as I was driving home, I would for once show I was reliable, a good and trusty soul. I swung a left, headed for the graveyard. It was a big, old, municipal place. The resting place for thousands over the years, and it took me the best part of an hour to find my sister. I am not sure if everywhere I drove cars were allowed, but it was heading towards midnight by this time and I was shattered. Eventually my headlights illuminated her name. Her headstone was fancy looking and I guess she would have been buried in some mighty fine clothes as well. In one of her silk-gloved hands, the undertaker would have tucked a radio, like the one I held. I pressed the transmit button and said with a wry grin on my face, "Breaker, breaker. Do you copy?" Silence followed. Of course it did. My sister was dead and buried, and the future was bright. I started to think about what type of TV I would buy. The walls in my pokey apartment were too small for the best widescreens I had admired in showrooms until I had been asked to leave. Obviously, I would also have to upgrade my accommodation. This was sweet. "Is that you?" The voice came from the radio. I almost dropped it, I was so surprised. It couldn't be. "Is that you, loser?" The voice broke out of the radio's speaker, loud and clear. It was my sister. I pressed the button to reply. "Yes," I mumbled. "You dipshit," she snapped back, "what took you so long?" "I was at the lawyer's," I began to explain. "He told me about." She cut me off. "I don't care. Just get me out of here. I will go get help." I was ready to bolt, ready to flag down the first fire truck or police wagon I saw and scream, "Help." "No." Her voice was distinct and sure. "I don't want anyone else to know. I have a reputation to maintain." "But?" I managed. Then the instruction came, "Dig me up." I was too freaked out to ask if it was okay for me to go get a shovel from somewhere. I fell down onto my hands and knees and began to paw at the dirt. It took a long time, and all the while I had my sister bitching at me how I was a good-for-nothing. Finally, with the first streaks of red appearing in the dawn sky, I made it down to the coffin lid. How on earth was I meant to open it though with my bare hands? I was still wondering when I had a click and the lid began to rise. Turns out she had a latch inside. I stood there and watched then as my sister sat up. The first thing I noticed was the smell. It was bad, like a house that's been shut for ages and has gone moldy. There's a possum died in there as well at some point, down in the cellar, and boy it was ripe. Her skin was gray and puffy under her otherwise still immaculately made up face. She was wearing a long black dress that probably cost more than I made in year. I offered my hand, and when she accepted my help to stand, the feel of her skin against mine made me want to retch. She felt so cold and dry. I tried not to show the nausea I was feeling. Asked instead the pressing question. "Do I still get the money?" She looked at me. Her eyes were bloodshot and some of the veins looked like they were wriggling. Almost like there were tiny worms in there. Which there could not have been, because it would be agonizing. In fact, the only problem my sister seemed to have was me. "You have a brain, you just never used it," she told me. Then stared at me intently. She seemed to be thinking, and her tone was different when she said, "I'm hungry." The scorn had disappeared and all I could hear was desire. "So hungry." She put her hand on the top of my head. "Quit that," I said. She ran her tongue across her lips. I noticed for the first time how cracked they were under the layer of lipstick. Dark flesh showed where her skin had broken open. "Feeding time," she whispered as I stared, and launched herself at me. I recoiled, managed to miss her teeth. She had tried to bite me. Crap. I realized my sister was one of the living dead. My sister was a frigging zombie. She screamed, bared her teeth, was going to come at me again, and eat my brain. The object of her hunger was by this point completely frazzled with terror. I was going to die at the hands of a monster that I had helped out of its prison, and I was scared beyond belief. My stomach cramped. Sweat dripped from my face. She moved towards me. Drool fell from her mouth, and held in its sticky grasp was a fat insect. It must have been inside her mouth, feasting on her rotting flesh. "No!" I yelled in desperation and ran at her. Somehow, her head was snapped back against the lid of the coffin and I heard a sickening crack. Her eyes rolled up and her hands flailed at the air. I began to stagger away. It is Wednesday evening where I am now, and I am waiting for the 5 days to be up. I know the money won't mean I can forget what happened, won't stop me waking up screaming. But it does mean I can get away from here and try and start a new life with as clean a conscience as I can have. I hope I did the right thing. I did not leave my sister struggling to get back out of her grave. I knew I had to finish her, so I did. I've seen enough zombie movies to know how. And afterwards, I filled the grave back in and I put her body in the boot of my car and I took it to the hospital. It is dark outside. The smoke is rising from the chimney of the incinerator. I think of what will remain even after the intense heat, of the fine ash that will fall back to earth. I know what it contains.